Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition, coming a day later this week due to the game being played on Monday. Of course, is Chelsea versus Newcastle United. And this week, the view from the opposition comes from a friend of the podcast, Scott Trotter. He's had a bit of a move within Reach PLC. He's now a football writer for Mirror Football. And if you want a little quirky thing to go and read, I did stumble across one of Scott's articles in which he got his hair cut by the barber of the stars. So, Scott, welcome back to the podcast. Just tell us a little bit about that article and who indeed has had their hair cut by the same barber you were letting loose on your lovely Barnet.
Yeah, I didn't let too much get chopped off, as you can probably tell already. But yeah, a guy called A-Star Barber. He's got a business in, I think it's Chessington, near Chelsea's kind of Cobham training base, and he kind of kicked off, I guess, locally, but then got a lot of their youth team in. But he's cut the hair of, Mbappe. I guess Pogba's kind of pertinent at the minute. Reece James. He does Nicholas Jackson and a few of the young guys at Chelsea as well. So yeah, he's kind of made a big name for himself on Instagram. Travelled to World Cups. I think when France won the World Cup, I think he was kind of embedded in their camp, kind of giving their mops a chop throughout the tournament. And yeah, he's done very well. And I was fortunate enough, I guess, to get a rare haircut.
That's quite the gig, that, isn't it? And having seen a little bit of Nicholas Jackson play, his Barnet's probably the best thing about him. So at least he's got that about him. Newcastle versus Chelsea on Monday then. And for you guys who've watched and listened to the match preview, myself and John Gibson, you will know that I'm absolutely buzzing about this game. It's not often I feel this optimistic and positive about a game, but I am really looking forward to it. Am I being a little bit overly optimistic about Monday from a Newcastle point of view, do you think? Because I think Newcastle have got this in the bag.
I guess it's hard to tell. I think maybe a little bit like Newcastle, what Chelsea's turning up and what kind of performance they're going to put in has been difficult to predict. I think Newcastle in particular have had some, I guess, compelling games against Chelsea. They've had two big wins at home, maybe a little bit less success at Stamford Bridge, which is obviously where the game's going to be. But, I guess Newcastle are still above Chelsea in the table. And I think, before coming on here, I was thinking about the last few times I've been on, maybe 3 or 4, and it feels very much the same situation for Chelsea, struggling at mid-table, lots of injury problems. And yeah, I think Newcastle have every right to feel like that they're going to take something away from the game.
Of course, I'll not be underestimating Chelsea because they have some talented players, but it's just the feeling around the club. And of course, I'm looking from the outside in, but things don't look all rosy down at Stamford Bridge. And I mentioned on yesterday's episode, watching the full press conference of Pochettino, he looks like a man on the ropes. Just how bad is it at the moment, and how much can Newcastle take advantage of on Monday?
Yeah, so I guess Chelsea are very much in the position where even when they've maybe found success, they had some good form kind of coming out with the festive break, and they're not really a moment away from maybe a disgruntled fan, worries about where, I guess that term, the project is going, what success they're going to have this season. And at the minute, I think Pochettino has found it quite difficult to say the right thing. Obviously, that Carabao Cup final against Liverpool was a massive chance to earn a first trophy. They couldn't do it. That Gary Neville line's obviously made plenty of headlines about the bottle jobs and Liverpool's kids. And just things like that, Pochettino come out and then saying that they perhaps played with penalties. I think maybe he was accurate in terms of explaining that's what his team was doing. But when you start coming out with things like that, and it sounds like you're actively trying to do that, it kind of just puts the wrong message out in there, like, places like Twitter, into the fandom in general. And I think, these press conferences now are talking about expectation, what you can expect from Chelsea. His first press conference, back in July, it was all about Chelsea are a club that needs to win. And that was kind of the understanding. And I think he still does understand that. But, these injuries, again, it becomes a reasonable thing to say. But when you hear it week after week, and I guess this is something all clubs and supporters get sick of hearing, it becomes tiresome. And, Chelsea aren't the only team to have suffered injury problems this season. Newcastle have suffered plenty of their own, and that does have an impact. But at the end of the day, when you're Chelsea, when you've spent money and, the last 2 decades have built up a certain expectation, if they're not going to win the league, they should be challenging for things. And while they are perhaps still, doing all right in domestic trophy competitions, cup competitions rather. They are still mid-table, and that has been the case for a little while now. And the longer that goes on, you wonder whether there is more than that for Chelsea, and what they are capable of. What is down to the squad that's been formed? What's down to Pochettino? What's down to the owners? It's still, I think 18 months into this new ownership, 6, 7, 8 months into Pochettino's kind of tenure as manager, and it still doesn't really feel like a lot. And maybe that mid-table position's a bit more reflective than what many would consider.
And it's interesting you mentioned the injuries, because Newcastle have had a torrid look of injuries this season, but anyhow, never really used it as an excuse. And I think that actually in the end got more on people's nerves than using it as an excuse, because it was like, well, actually you've got a valid excuse, but he didn't ever want to really use it as one. But just going back to his press conferences, my colleague John Gibson made an excellent point in yesterday's episode that the press conferences don't look inspiring, that they offer no signs of encouragement, they're no signs of motivation. They're very dull and kind of, in a way, defeatist. And if you're an opposition manager and you watch that, you think, goodness me, he really does not look happy. And I'm just wondering, do you think that is the case? And B, does that kind of transfer into the dressing room and then onto the terraces as well?
It's an interesting one, because I think Pochettino is probably one of the figures and characters who has a bit of a reputation for having a bit of charisma in a press conference. He certainly has the ability to maybe not get the press on side, but he's a personable person. He will kind of communicate. He's got his present in all his press conferences as well, so there's plenty of handshakes with media members, and he has been a compelling figure. He's not afraid to joke, and those sections where the cameras go down, he does like to put himself out there a little bit more. I think he's a little bit wary of the cameras and how that can be perceived, but he's smart. And I think what has maybe become a little bit difficult for him is because Chelsea have been stuck in this position of never quite being able to get into a run of form that's seen them kick on to look like a real European challenger. They have had lots of injuries. They are getting asked about, transfers, his future. That's kind of been the case since September now. And I guess it's difficult to be inspiring when you're asked about the same topics so consistently. And I guess it's difficult to, sound convincing when you need to kind of put these answers out time and again. And I think that's certainly been problematic for Chelsea fans, because they have looked for, solace in his words in terms of, Chelsea should be winning. They want him to maybe, I think there was a moment earlier on the season where they really wanted him to get on Anthony Taylor's back, because he'd kind of aggrieved Chelsea, and he didn't take that opportunity to kind of become one with the fans. I think certainly now there's, a thought that the fans, there was boos in the away end of Brentford last weekend, and there's that element that there's not really a connection between manager and supporters, and I don't think he's really taken the opportunity to kind of form that bond either. Obviously, plenty of people maybe mock the likes of Arsenal celebrations, Liverpool's Klopp kind of geeing up the supporters, and I guess even Newcastle's kind of bond and exercises to an extent as well. But I think, Chelsea fans have maybe craved that a little bit, and maybe there haven't always been moments, maybe there've been more difficult moments. And, you go and see the fans and you're not going to like what they've got to say a lot of this season. The question of whether that's translated to the players, again, is tough. It's a really young group, and I think they are going to feed off whatever the coach can give them. I think they have shown on occasion the ability to kind of fight in a game, to fight back and to produce really impressive moments, but it's been few and far between. I think obviously that Newcastle Cup match that they kind of came back right at the end and showed perhaps some bottle to convert that to progress in the Carabao Cup. And other times they can't hang on to leads. They struggle against teams like Brentford. They find it easier to get up for the big matches. And I think that's going to be really interesting this week, because I guess Newcastle, it'll be interesting how they're seen by this Chelsea side, because they have on occasion proved to be a real top side, but maybe not the caliber or, have the reputation of the likes of your Arsenal's, Man City's just yet. So it's going to be really interesting how they react to that. And I think kind of as Chelsea's results have shown that what the players on the pitch can offer has been, really inconsistent. And yeah, he's not really kind of inspired them. I think his substitutions often take criticism. I think recently, on multiple occasions, he's kind of laid the excuse that he's not had players to save the legs of those that are starting, particularly in the midfield. He's not looked at his substitutions, and he's left players on the bench and not utilised them. So I think, that probably sends a pretty clear message to those guys who haven't been used. They have been younger academy players a lot of the time, but I guess because of what we saw with Liverpool in that Carabao Cup final and relying on young players, that kind of perhaps grinds both with players and fans. And, there just really needs to be an injection of belief at Chelsea, I think.
Yeah, and like I say, watching the press conference, it's certainly not there at the moment. And you mentioned there about the chance against Brentford. I mean, from what I saw, Brentford really should have won that game. Chelsea were very fortunate to come away with a point, and there were, as you say, there was boos. There's some chance for Jose Mourinho. How much does that play into preparation for Monday? Because, I mean, he's aware of it. He's been asked about it. He knows it's happening, and it's very difficult. I think in one instance, maybe when you're being booed, it might be a little bit easier to kind of not ignore it, but okay, it's there. He said, actually, I understand. And actually, before I get onto the point, the quote that he said was, if I was a fan, I would understand. So he's admitting things are pretty dire, and that leads into the point we're just making about a lack of, motivation, inspiration, encouragement, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's tricky because I think in one element you do want your manager, your head coach to be realistic. You want him to see that he has an understanding of the situation that he's in. You don't want him to see him, brushing it off, I guess, like with these injuries and thinking, the XG's been great for all these games. There's nothing to worry about, because that doesn't really kind of cut the cloth when you look at the Premier League table. I think there obviously is a big awareness. I think around this time, was it just a year ago? It feels like a lifetime ago. The fans turned on Graham Potter, and I think that had a real significant kind of impact in his departure in the early April, I think, after a defeat to Aston Villa. And, the chance kind of turned on the owners at that point as well. I don't know whether we're quite at that point with Pochettino, but there obviously is. And a lot of these chances have been present, throughout the tenure of the new owners, the likes of chance for Roman Abramovich. I think we've even spoken about that before, maybe. Chance for the likes of Jose Mourinho, who I probably don't think is the right option for Chelsea at the minute with, I guess going off stereotypes, all the young players that they do have at their disposal. But it will kind of feel significant. I think there is a want to get to the end of the season with Pochettino and assess things then. That's kind of always been the plan, despite him having a 2-year contract. Because certainly in the early parts of the season, they did like the kind of underlying numbers of everything despite the form. I think things are maybe a little bit more difficult now than what they probably expected. I guess you expect those numbers and 50-50s to turn. I think what's going to be interesting is because this is, on the whole, a new squad. They haven't been at the club long. They've only known Pochettino at the club. So can that be a galvanizing point rather than turning on him? Can that become a backs to the wall, prove everyone wrong kind of situation? And I guess, games like Newcastle are going to be certainly pivotal to try and prove that they have some merit.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, the point that I was trying to get at was about the prep, because Newcastle United might look at it and think, well, if we can get an early goal here, or we can hit them with a really strong sliding challenge in the first 20 seconds, if we can set the tone with a high press, the aim has to be to get those fans who are quite clearly disgruntled, to get them to go up another level of discontent very early on, because that is going to be key, isn't it? An early goal for Newcastle and Stamford Bridge could become a very uncomfortable place for Chelsea and its manager.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that has kind of been evident in the team, even without the fans as well. They've, had this ability to kind of let teams get at them if they don't find the momentum. I think Arsenal, they obviously put in a really good performance, but then they kind of dropped and let Arsenal back into the game. They do have a vulnerability, I guess, in that midfield, in that back line, and it has kind of seen a variety of players due to injuries and things like that. They are a team that does allow the opposition to have big chances and opportunities to take the game away from them. And I think particularly early in the game, but certainly if Chelsea go ahead, Newcastle won't necessarily be out of the game. But yeah, I think momentum is a really big thing for this team as well.
Does he still have the dressing room? Because at times when you do watch Chelsea, it looks very unorganized. A lot of hands on the hips. It doesn't look united. But what do you understand about the dressing room? Are they still backing the manager, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's one of those tricky ones because there's been so many instances this season where you perhaps look at Chelsea, and I think those patterns of play going forward certainly been something that a lot of people believe are missing. But I think it's those in-game adaptations that they I guess are challenged. I mentioned about the substitutes before, and I guess it's just really difficult to tell at the moment because the performances or results haven't already been good. So you can't kind of outline that point where maybe things have went wrong. They are still proving themselves able to compete. They took Liverpool all the way to extra time. So I do think he has, if not on side, though I've got no kind of reason to doubt it, I do think he still has the ear of the dressing room. I think, he's still kind of making big decisions in terms of Thiago Silva started to drop out the side a little bit for the first time. They do seem to be kind of moving on in that way. But there obviously is always going to be this question of, when Chelsea do get hit, where is that kind of punch back? Where is that reaction a lot of the time? And that's something that they still need to show. And I guess it's instances like that that's kind of going to prove that they maybe have, they do support the manager wholeheartedly. They do have kind of, again, to go back to it, that belief in themselves and the manager to take something from a game, even when the chips are down.
You mentioned earlier in the show about injuries. Just talk us through who's going to be missing and why that could be key on Monday.
Yes, I guess the big news to come out this week was Ben Chilwell is going to see a knee specialist. He won't be playing, so that's kind of lack of a left back again. He's obviously missed a great deal of the season, but they also have Marco Correa. He is kind of coming back into the side. Hasn't obviously again played too much this season due to injury. Levi Colwill, again, another missing the heart of defence. And Conor Gallagher, I guess, potentially Chelsea's player of the season. I guess other people might argue Cole Palmer, but he's been ill, missed training this week. I think not entirely ruled out of the game, but maybe when you're listed on, I guess, the club's injury list 5 days before a match, there's not really a lot of conviction that he is going to be a bit available for that Newcastle match. I know Pochettino said about perhaps concerns over him losing weight and power ahead of that game. And that will really be a big miss for all the talents of Enzo Fernandez and Moise Caicedo. I think Conor Gallagher has really brought the drive. And I guess he is kind of the manager on the pitch. He is kind of the embodiment of what you want to see when Chelsea are at it a lot of the time. So he will be a significant miss. And then it's a whole list of players that have been missing for a long time. I guess Benoit Badiashile missing from the defence as well. So probably see Thiago Silva in the back line. I think he's had some difficult moments against Newcastle in recent times as well. So that'll be interesting to see. Christopher Nkunku, I guess perennially out since joining, again, is going to be absent from the clash. And then just a whole load of guys like Romeo Lavia, Leslie Ogochukwu, Kani Chukwuemeka's returned to train, but probably not going to be involved just yet, certainly not from the start. So yeah, just a long list of players for Chelsea once again.
Yeah, that is a long list and some key players there missing, and another element of Chelsea's preparation, which hopefully Newcastle can take advantage of. Newcastle coming to this game, having beaten Wolves at home, probably their best performance for a long while, better intensity. The high press was there. If they bring that into the game against Chelsea, how does that suit them?
Yeah, I think it'll be big. I mean, Chelsea do have the ability to play that way. They've shown against Arsenal and Man City this season, but I think Gallagher is really big for that being successful. And I think what is going to be interesting with that intensity, if Newcastle can hit them early, Reece James is out, Ben Chilwell's out, and Conor Gallagher's out. That's captain, vice-captain, and vice-vice-captain all missing for them. So kind of searching for those leaders within a young team. Obviously, Silva is there, but I think, was it earlier this season? Silva and Chelsea maybe showed that they were vulnerable to Newcastle providing some intensity. They have the ability to make a mistake in the back line, have a moment of pause, a lack of certainty. And I think that's probably going to be really big with that back line changing once again, with obviously Colwell dropping out and Chilwell dropping out. So that'll be kind of interesting how that impacts things. And yeah, that midfield battle is going to be really interesting. Once again, obviously, Newcastle not afraid to mix it in the centre of the park. And I think there's going to be a big demand on Caicedo, who again is, I guess, an interesting one because I think he's possibly because of the fee right forward has had a lot of criticism from the pundits on television and stuff. And that's maybe bemused a few Chelsea fans because he's probably been one of the better aspects of Chelsea's play a lot of the time. He's not afraid to get a tackle and he puts himself about, but does have the ability to draw a yellow card. And, you know, if that happens early, that again lends problems. I think, you know, that intensive, if they are on the front foot, does play into Chelsea hands in terms of, you know, it then allows them the ability to break quickly through the likes of Palmer, maybe Sterling if he starts. Nicholas Jackson, for all his faults, does have that ability to get behind the back line as well. So yeah, it will come with pros and cons, but I think because of Chelsea's form, you do really have to establish yourself on the game against them, and you can take advantage of them.
I mean, the thing we saw against Wolves when Newcastle were out of possession, they sat deep, which is what they hadn't been doing in recent months. But there was a tactical tweak where we saw the three midfielders essentially sitting on the edge of their own box, inviting pressure on, winning the ball, and then breaking on the counter, and it worked really, really well. Joe Willock being the key difference in for Lewis Miley. I mean, Willock's missed a heck of a lot of football, but you can see just how much Newcastle have missed him with the poor performance he put in against Wolves and Blackburn as well. Is this a game Pochettino needs to win?
Yes, in a lot of ways. I think, you know, we're coming up to the last, 11 games of the season now. There's not a great deal of time to establish any kind of momentum or enthusiasm, I guess, for next season, if there is any hope that he is still there next season. And I don't think he's necessarily at risk of losing his job, like in the immediate aftermath of the game. Never say never with Chelsea, but I don't think that is the case just yet. But in terms of having any chance of keeping the fans on side, I think a big result will go a long way. And, you know, I almost for, I guess, respect, you really want to see Chelsea finishing in that top half. They should have been challenging for those European spots. I think they've had opportunities to kick on and do that on multiple occasions this season, and it's looking more and more difficult as each week goes by. But if you can get a good result against another good team, it does give that, you know, the players belief again. If nothing else, Chelsea have shown the ability to kind of mix it with those big teams. Maybe not all the time, but certainly that has been among the kind of better aspects of this Chelsea team this season. And, you know, it gives people some hope for the remaining weeks of the season, perhaps.
Well, tell us how it's going to go on Monday. What's your prediction? I
think Newcastle will get a result. I don't know whether it's going to be a win. I think maybe a score draw, maybe a 2-2. I think Chelsea, if they can start strong, maybe get an advantage, but I think they always have that moment where they drop off at some point, and I think maybe Newcastle's intensity and, you know, quality players like Isak will be able to take advantage of that Chelsea backline, but maybe Cole Palmer can find some magic to provide a nice assist or two and keep the game interesting. So I'll go 2-2 and maybe entertain the affair on Monday.
I'm shaking my head there because Cole Palmer is going to be outshone by Anthony Gordon, who deserves to be in the England squad ahead of him because he does more than just score penalties. So Anthony Gordon's going to hopefully catch the eye of Gareth Southgate, while Palmer, I don't know, you know, falls into mediocrity is the word I was looking for there. But I'm going to go a Newcastle United win. I'm feeling very positive about this. I think there's a lot of elements off the field which lend itself to Newcastle taking advantage on the field. Early goals are going to be key. You know, a thumping challenge very early on, I think, is also going to set the tone. So I'm going to go for a Newcastle United win. I don't know, 3-1 maybe. I'm feeling that optimistic. our listeners will be falling off their seats because I'm never usually this optimistic. The most feedback I get about is being called Mr. Negative. So here we are, Mr. Probably overwhelmingly optimistic. But hey, that's what I'm feeling right now. So Newcastle United win, hopefully. Thank you to Scott for popping on to the podcast on his day off as well, ladies and gents. So the man deserves a huge round of applause for providing the insight into Chelsea, Newcastle's opposition on Monday. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, give the video a thumbs up. Get in the comments. Let us know how you're feeling about Monday night. And if you listen on our audio channel, please leave us a rating and review. And head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news. And I'll see you